Hey guys, going to start with how the knight moves in today's lesson. And I have to say that knights are by far my most favorite chess piece of all time. I used to have a friend, actually still a friend of mine, who used to say that the knight is a brick. He used to say it was a brick something house. I won't say what word he used to describe what kind of house it was, but I have to agree with him that it is a pretty formidable weapon. So let's jump right into it. Let's look at the chessboard from the starting position to see what the issues are regarding the knight. So right here from the starting position, we can see that this piece, and this piece, and this piece on the black side, these are your knights, and both sides have two knights. Both sides have a knight that sits on a dark square and also on a light square. So keep that in mind. When knights move, they move in a very unusual way that is different from every other piece on the board. Most pieces have to move diagonally or they have to move linearly, up and down. The knights don't do any of that. The knights can actually jump over other pieces to land on a square that it desires. So if this knight wants to go to this square, he can jump over this piece and then go right to here, or it can go here, jump over this piece and go to there. Or if he goes from here, he can jump on the top of the head of this one, jump over this one, go to there, on and on and on, right? So the move that a knight makes is sort of an L shape. That's the way it's normally described. So this would be an L. If you look at this is the long side of the L, the short side of the L. Well, the knight can land there. But the L doesn't have to be your traditional L shape. The L can be backwards, can go this way. The L can be upside down. It can go from here and then that way, right? It can go from here, it can go out that way. It can even be sideways. It can go this way and then up this way. So the L can happen in many different ways, but the point is the motion is usually two and then one, or one and then two squares. So no other piece can do that. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you're talking about this knight versus this knight, and this is the same, everything I'm saying is the same, is true for whoever's playing the black pieces as well. But if the knight starts out on a dark square, it must land on a light square. Okay, now you can see that the L goes from here and then it lands on a light square, or it goes from here and it lands on a light square. There's no way that we can create an L that would land on this square, and of course this square is just too far out of reach. So this knight has the opposite concern. If it makes the L shape, it lands on a dark square because it starts out on a light square and so forth. Now, the squares that these knights occupy change in color depending on what square they land on. So if the knight is sitting here, obviously the next time it moves, it's going to have to land on a light square and so forth. So just keep that in mind. At the beginning of the game, then let me just, you were often thinking about, well, what move should I make in the beginning of the game? And we're going to get more in depth into opening moves later in our series. But since we're talking about knights, it is possible for your first move of the game as white to move one of your knights. You can either move this one or you can move this one. And in return, if the person who's playing the black pieces decided they'd like to get their knights in the game first, they could do that as well. I'm not saying that's how you should play. I'm not saying that's the best move, but just know that these are valid moves and some people do play knights first. At any rate, the knight is one of the pieces that you should consider when you're thinking about opening your game. Okay. All right, let's see. What else we got? Another thing about the knight is that its scope is very limited when it starts out the game. the knight is sitting on this square, and it really, as it sits right now, with no other pieces moved yet, let's say you were considering moving the knight first, it only has scope to these squares. 2 squares, that's it. Because they're its own pieces occupying other squares, and the L shape doesn't allow it to get any further into the game. So you can see that if the knight was here, let's say, the knight has a lot more scope, right? Because sitting on a light square, it could also go here, 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 right, and here. So the further the knight gets towards the center of the board, the more scope the knight has. So you can imagine if you've got 2 knights already developed, you've got some pretty awesome chess pieces, right? So this knight can control this square, this square, this square, this square. This knight here controls this square, this square, this square. Oops, no, I got him on the wrong one. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. I think you get my drift here. These 2 knights together control a lot of material. So the further they are up on the board, the more powerful and the more intimidating they become to the opponent. And again, everything I'm telling you is the same for black. If you're looking at the board from black's perspective, it's exactly the same issues, right? Let's see. Now, as far as how it captures, the knight can capture pieces that are on squares that it can land. So let's put this piece back. So let's say this is the knight that we moved first, right? And black decided to move a pawn. Well, that's an L shape. The white knight can land on that square, and now that pawn is gone. It gobbled it right up. Let's say black decided to challenge the knight with the pawn. See, they're actually touching. The pawn could capture. I know I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but the knight could decide that, okay, I'm not having any of that. And since I can't capture you, I'm going to move back. Let's go back, see what I mean. So the knight can't capture that pawn because the knight has to land on a light color square. So the knight has no choice but to retreat if attacked by that pawn, okay? So let's say the knight goes back. So the knight can move in any direction, and it has to land on a square that's the opposite color of the square that it started out. And if an enemy piece is on its own square, including a knight, let's say there was a knight here, boom, that's an L shape. So the white knight can capture that knight. All right. So the only thing the knight cannot do is if it has a piece on a square, even though this is a dark square and I'm starting on a light square, I can land on all of the other dark squares. Let's put this piece back. I can land here, I can land here, I can land here, I can land here, but I can't land there. And the reason I can't land there is because my own piece is there. Let's put this back. However, if my enemy had a piece there, I can capture that because it's an enemy piece and I can capture enemy pieces at any time. All right, I think that's it. So now you have an idea of how knights move, and we are ready to go to the bishop next. So, hey, if you like this video, like, subscribe, and hey, give me a thumbs up. And let me know in the comment section if you like what I'm doing or if there's something else I can answer for you. All right. Talk to you later. Have a good one.